All right, it's time to get started. So let's finish up the book of Song of Solomon. Anybody want to cheer about that? We're super excited. Class is finally going to be over. Uh, you know, I enjoy the book. I know that also doesn't mean that everybody enjoys the book, but I hope maybe there's been some interesting pieces and it's been helpful to you in some ways. And we're going to be moving into chapter 8 tonight and finishing up, and then we'll have some kind of review type ideas from the book as we try to draw in some spiritual application before the end of the class. I've entitled this one, I normally talk about it like flashback, but I want to be honest and say the chapter itself is a little bit of an odd duck, and I'm not exactly sure what to do with the chapter. There are some possibilities that they are flashbacks of the husband and the wife, and particularly the wife thinking back on her early life. It is also possible that it is a flash forward of the next generation, kind of what the end result of a godly marriage is that it creates godly marriages or at least a godly perspective in the children. And so both of those are possibilities. We'll talk about them both as we dig into some of the lessons and applications, and maybe they'll be helpful for you as we move forward with the text. So let's go ahead and just kind of go through the text briefly. And again, this of all the sections of Song of Solomon, this one seems to skip around the most, which again is one reason that this chapter seems to stick out a little bit, and it's hard to know what to do with it because I don't know if your text in your Bible is broken up the way mine is, but elsewhere in the book there are long sections of praise or adoration or just nice, kind things that are being said. In this section, you've got short little sections. And so it's as if it's changing perspective over and over again, which I believe it is. And so that makes it a little bit difficult to be able to figure out what's going on here. But let's go ahead and dig into the text and read it here. If only I could treat you like my brother, one who nursed at my mother's breast, I would find you in public and kiss you, and no one would scorn me. I would lead you, I would take you to the house of my mother who taught me. I would give you spiced wine to drink from the juice of my pomegranate. May his left hand be under my head, and his right arm embrace me. Young women of Jerusalem, I charge you, do not stir up or awaken love until the appropriate time. Who is this coming up from the wilderness, leaning on the one she loved? I awakened you under the apricot tree. There your mother conceived you. There she conceived and gave you birth. Set me as a seal on your heart, as a seal on your arm. For love is as strong as death. Jealousy is as unrelenting as Sheol. Love's flames are fiery flames, an almighty flame. A huge torrent cannot extinguish love. Rivers cannot sweep it away. If a man were to give all his wealth for love, it would be utterly scorned. Our sister is young. She has no breast. What will we do for our sister on the day she is spoken for? If she is a wall, we will build a silver barricade on it. If she is a door, we will enclose her with cedar planks. I am a wall, and my breast like towers. So to him I have become like one who finds peace. Solomon owned a vineyard in Baal Hamon. He leased the vineyard to tenants. Each was to bring for his fruit 1,000 pieces of silver. I have my own vineyard. The 1,000 are for you, Solomon, but 200 for those who take care of its fruit. You who dwell in the gardens, companions are listening for your voice. Let me hear you. Run away with me, my love, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountains of spices. All right, so that's our text. And we have to figure out what to do with that text because it's coming from a lot of different perspectives, and you have to look for the context clues to figure out who's talking and who they're talking to or what they're talking about. And some of it is still left up in the air as far as what you believe is being said. So let me go back to the beginning of the text and let's try to piece through this a little bit. I would have, and again, because of our format, I can't get your feedback real easily. So I'm just going to kind of give you my own perspective and interpretation. You feel free to argue with me on it, and or argue with me some other time on it. That's perfectly okay. I would take this first little section here, verses 1 down through verse 4, to be the woman speaking. Or again, it depends on if you're viewing this as a flashback or are you viewing it as a flash forward. That makes a big difference in the way that you interpret who's speaking. But here, because it mentions my brother, it mentions my mother, it mentions family as a whole, and it mentions the family whose role it was in this chapter. It mentions family whose role it was to protect her. Sorry about that. Um, that tends to make me think that this is the bride speaking, and she's as a maturely married woman, talking about the fact that she still desires to love on her husband publicly. If I could love on you the way one would love on his brother in public, and nobody thinks anything was inappropriate with that, that would just be wonderful. I would lead you, and I would take you to my mom's house, and I would give you spiced wine. I would treat you with kindness. I would treat you with hospitality. I would treat you. Some would even argue these are innuendo references to some sort of intimacy. May his left hand be under my head. Again, that idea of seeking embrace. So again, some people view this as being a flashback because it sounds somewhat similar to what you read back in chapter 1, where she's saying that she desires his caresses, she desires that he hold her, and that she could, taste the taste of his lips and those types of things. And particularly verse 4 there, you have a repeat. Verse 4, young women of Jerusalem, I charge you, do not stir up or awaken love until the appropriate time. If you remember back in the early parts of the book, you have that same sort of statement made over and over again. That idea of not awakening love, chapter 2, verse 7, you have that idea. And then again in chapter 3, verse 5, you have that idea. So some people think this is more just the remembering of how it was, remembering their passion when they were courting, remembering the way they loved each other and desired each other. And the point here is going to be, how do you create that kind of desire and love? Well, that led to this great marriage. Well, this chapter is a flashback of how that came about. What kind of upbringing this woman had that allowed her to pursue that kind of loving relationship. Again, because I'm trying to handle this from both directions, it's also possible that what's going on is this is a flash forward to their daughter. So you've got the husband and wife who are married. They've worked through their struggles of marriage. Now they've had a daughter, and their daughter is having her passion and desire for a man awakened, and she is saying, "Oh, I desire this," and it's kind of a nod back to she's just like her mother. She's asking and saying the same things her mother said back in the beginning of the book. Either way, you're going to walk away with the same practical lesson. So I don't care which way you go with it. Either way you go with it, you're going to walk away with the same practical lesson. Then you come to this next section where it seems that someone else is speaking. Who is this coming up from the wilderness, leaning on the one she loves? So that's a reference to what it just talked about in the first 4 verses. I wish I could display my attraction to you publicly, and now apparently she is leaning on the one she loves. And I think personally, this is a section where the father is speaking. I view this as a flashback personally, and I think this is the father speaking up and saying, we raised you right. I awakened you under the apricot tree. There, your mother conceived you, meaning that they were intimate. You were conceived. She gave you birth, and I became a seal on your heart. I protected you. I watched over you. I guarded you. I became the reason why you stayed pure. Is the idea here. Now that's the flashback interpretation. Again, if you do the flash forward interpretation, you've got a similar message. That's what the husband through the whole book is saying to his daughter. He's saying, "Who is this that's coming up and showing attraction to a man? We conceived you, we have given birth to you, and I have protected you." Is what the husband is saying in this particular text. For love is as strong as death, jealousy is as unrelenting as Sheol. Love's flames are fiery flames, an almighty flame. The idea of the strength and power of passion and love. That again, I think, is the Father speaking, and He's saying that this is why I'm protecting you. Love, our expression that we use these days with young people is, remember that love is blind, right? You've got a daughter or son who's just head over heels for somebody that he goes to school with, or somebody, and you basically say, you need to be very careful. Our job is to protect you. If he's not the right kind of guy, or you need to realize we can see more than you can see. You need to listen to our wisdom. Any of you parents had those kind of conversations with your kids? How you needed to be very careful. You need to be very cautious. Love is a very powerful force. Those feelings of attraction are very powerful. You need to be cautious. So it's not a far-fetched idea that this would be the father speaking, either to the woman of the book in a flashback, or the husband of the book speaking to his own daughter in a flash forward. Now we've got brothers speaking. So we have the woman speaking, a woman speaking, whichever woman you interpret. You have her father speaking, and now you have her brother speaking. Our sister is young. She has no breath. That doesn't mean she literally doesn't. It means that she is not developed. She is not or maybe even it's just a way of saying she's too young for this. She's too young to have a boyfriend, kind of expression. And they basically say, if she's a wall, meaning she is pure and she keeps boys back and she is making sure that she is maintaining their purity, then we will build a silver barricade on her, meaning we will protect her, but we will also honor her. If she's a door, meaning she has made herself available to others, we will enclose her with cedar planks, meaning we will build an impenetrable place around her so that she is protected. That's the idea here. Either way, she can be of the kind of character where we bring her honor because she has protected herself while protecting her. Or if she's not protecting herself, then we will do the hard job of protecting her. So that's the brother's perspective here of taking care of their sister. So she responds with, I am a wall, and my breasts like towers. So I've been pure and I'm old enough. I mean, that's put it in layman's terms here. So she's arguing she is old enough for this kind of relationship, but she is being cautious. She is being pure. She is being a wall and not a door. And because of that, because she is both mature and meaning mature physically, she's old enough for this kind of relationship, and because she is pure, uh, to him she's become like one who finds peace. So she is attracted to the man that she is attracted to, is basically the idea there. And so Solomon owned a vineyard in Baal Haman. He leased to tenants. He's basically saying he has incredibly rich, vibrant vineyards for which people would pay 1,000, a thousand pieces of silver for a piece of fruit from Solomon's vineyard. Well, she's saying, I am a vineyard. I am also valuable. And to her, Solomon, to her love, he would pay 200, he values her, and she values the fact that those who have taken care of her over the years have done that job. So this is her way of saying, thank you, Dad, thank you, brothers, for protecting me. I am a valuable possibility for this man that I love, and the reason I'm a valuable possibility to that man, the reason he values me, the reason I bring him peace is because the father and the brothers have done their job of protecting her and watching out for her and making sure that she stays pure. Okay? You who dwell in the garden, companions are listening for your voice. Let me hear you. Run away with me, my love, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on mountains of spices. So again, that call to love. If this is the flashback version, so this chapter 8 is the story of this now married woman's upbringing. This again reminds us of some of the statements where you have those calls to love earlier in the book. If this is the flash forward option, again, you have that same picture of what we saw in the book. And it's an idea of this story of love is going to repeat itself because the father and the mother have done such a good job of building their life on the principles of God and purity, that you're going to have the same sort of love story for the next generation. Either way you go there, it's a nice story of the way God's plan works. Okay? So before we move on, any questions or thoughts about that? You're welcome to disagree too. It doesn't bother me at all. See, if y'all speak, I get more water in between, these long discourses of me talking. So, okay, well, apparently there are no questions, so we will go back to the screen. Well, before we go back to the screen, let me ask this. At least by show of hands, which one of you are more comfortable with the flashback concept? That this is their story kind of being reviewed. Which one of you prefer the flash forward concept? Which one of you don't know which one to go with whatsoever? Okay, there's most of the group. Okay. I will say, because it's not clear, I have learned over the years that God is clear about the things God plans to be clear on. It's like Deuteronomy 29:29. The secret things belong to the Lord, but the things that are revealed belong to us and our children forever, so that we might obey. And that whole idea of when God wants to be absolutely certain we understand something a certain way, it's clear. When it doesn't really matter which way we understand it, it's not clear. There's some ambiguity to it. And so here, I think there's intentionally some ambiguity. And I think the point is to make us think of both what cause their relationship to be good? And if it's a flash forward, how will that affect the next generation? It will also cause their relationship to be good. And all of that is very supported by statistical evidence. Um, the likelihood of a child growing up and being divorced is dramatically increased when that's been part of his history, when that's what he watched his own parents do. And so that's just one of those things. That doesn't mean it does go to the next generation, but it does mean that there's a higher likelihood. And so those who have been divorced have to work extra hard to build that relationship and build it for the children so that they can see how a good relationship works when they're able to be in one. And so that's why children watch what their parents do. It does repeat generation after generation unless somebody breaks the cycle. And so just like the bad things can repeat, the good things can repeat. When you see a good marriage as your example, the odds are much more likely that the next generation is going to have good marriages because they have good models, they have good ideas of how marriage works and how they're supposed to love their spouse and sacrifice for them and do all the things that the Bible teaches. And so, there's a part of me that likes the flash forward concept. I think it's perfectly within keeping of biblical ideas. And so either way you wanted to go with it, I think you're in safe territory and trying to understand it that way. So what you have here is the woman, in my personal take of the book, the woman kind of has a flashback to the beginning of their relationship. They were friends, they desired one another, but he held to his standard. She was held to that standard by her father, or her father remembers that he was the seal over her heart, that he was kind of I even like the expression, the seal on her arm. Any idea what that might mean? The seal on our arm would be like he has a presence with her wherever she goes. Like she doesn't go out and people not know, oh, that's Adam's daughter. We better respect her or we're going to have to deal with Adam, kind of thing. He is not just a seal over her heart, protecting her emotions, but he is a seal over, he is a public presence that guards her. And so you've got that protection there that comes from the father. The brothers do the same thing. They're very protective of her, and I think that is a wonderful thing. That's one thing we really have tried to work hard at with our own boys and trying to teach them to be protective of their sisters. And they tend to be very protective of Maple and much less protective of Janie, mostly because Janie can boss them around like you've never seen, and all of that. So it's one of those. But we're trying to teach them to be kind of that chivalrous, gentlemanly protectors of their sisters, because I think there's a very strong biblical role for that. And so she in this recognizes the value of what her family has done to protect her through the years, because their protection has brought her a husband that she loves. And at the end of the book, you've got that again, that call to love, that call to intimacy. Let's head on out, be like gazelles and stags on the mountains of spices. Same kind of idea. By the way, man, I don't think that'll work these days. You can't say, "Hey, honey, let's go." Let's go. I'm not even going to go there. So, too many bad directions to take that conversation. So again, it's important to recognize that men and women aren't on their own in this. And I think there's a tendency in our modern culture to allow that. Well, they're old enough, let them just make decisions for themselves. Or, they're old enough, they're going to make their mistakes. We just kind of have to let them make their mistakes and pray for them. That's not what you see here in this book. You see them being very protective. One of the reasons you'll even find that they're protective is under the old law. If I, as a father, were to marry my daughter to a man as an Israelite, and my daughter is found to not be a virgin when she claimed to be a virgin, what was the penalty for that? If I remember correctly, it's death. Or if I have a daughter who is at the very least, there were some circumstances in which she would just be sent home. So I'll say this as kindly as possible. Under the old law, you got stuck with them. If you didn't keep them pure, they became yours, forever. Nobody wanted them, and so the fathers very seriously first did two things. One is they protected their daughters, they protected their purity. Second of all, a father was the one that had to vouch for his daughter's purity. And in these days, fathers know so little about their children's personal lives in a lot of situations that I don't know that most fathers these days could vouch for their children's purity. But under the old law, that was exactly the way it was supposed to happen. And so again, you can understand why there would be some caution and carefulness in the way that a lot of this is handled. So, lessons on maturing marriages before, and we'll stop and have a little bit of discussion if you'll have anything to add. And then we'll do a couple of lessons on the spiritual applications of the book. But first of all, lessons on maturing marriages, and before marriage, we should be innocent. That's part of what I think Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 8, if you want to turn over there. Hebrews chapter 13 and not verse 8, verse 4. Marriage is to be held in honor among all, and the marriage bed is to be undefiled. For fornicators and adulterers, God will judge. So again, we tend to oftentimes focus on that second part of the verse of the marriage bed being undefiled, and I think that applies here in this situation. But part of the way that happens is that marriage has to be held in honor. That marriage needs to be something that we hold up in the highest of esteem, something that we consider to be the most important relationship that we can be preparing our children for outside of their relationship with God. And it is something that if I can model being a good husband for my three sons, and I can model what to expect from a husband for my two daughters, that is going to do so much good for them. And when I fail to be a good husband in front of my sons, that does a ton of damage. When I don't view marriage as being an important thing, for instance, for a while there, and we still kind of have this rule, and we've had several people tell us we're a little bit crazy for this, but we won't let our kids watch certain cartoons because of even cartoons because of the marriages that are within those shows or movies. Because we don't want our children to grow up thinking it's normal for a woman to just browbeat her husband. And we don't want our children to grow up thinking it's normal for a man to just sit around and be lazy. And we don't want, and these are just the stereotypical marriages that are on television shows today. We don't want our children to grow up thinking it's normal to cheat on your spouse. We don't want our children growing up thinking that any of those awkward and difficult marriage situations are good or normal or acceptable, because in God's eyes they're not. In God's eyes, these are the very marriage is something that is to be held in the highest esteem. Well, then we need to be presenting our children with examples of marriages that hold, that ideal that God teaches. And again, that doesn't mean no opinionated women. That doesn't mean no, men who are more quiet and laid back. Personalities are one thing, but when marriage itself or the rules of marriage in Scripture themselves are not honored, well, then that becomes a very difficult thing to teach children. And so part of holding marriage in high esteem is holding God's rules for marriage in high esteem. Part of that, again, getting back to sexual purity, a man and a woman must not arouse love until it pleases. It repeats that again and again and again in the book. And every single time that is held up as the standard. And notice, and I don't think we got into this in an earlier class, but notice what it says is that you're not to arouse love, not necessarily act on love. And I say that because there's a big, I think, misunderstanding out there in the world today where people think it's okay to, well, as long as they, don't cross this line right here that we've drawn, well, then we're okay with it. Well, that's first of all, that's dangerous, because when have children ever towed the line the way they're supposed to toe the line? Some children better than others, but most children won't. Secondly, the standard here is not do not cross the line of physical activity. What it says here is don't arouse love, meaning don't play around with it. It is as it said at the end, it is a torrent. It is the way it words in the New American Standard. Many waters cannot quench love, nor will rivers overflow it. When a guy or a girl fall in love with their sweetheart, and that love of theirs tries to convince them that all that you really need in order to have sex is you just need to be in love with the person. Is that going to go well? Not at all. And even if you're able to withstand the physical intimacy, there is a lot of emotional and mental difficulties that are dealt with when someone arouses love and passion and that sort of depth of relationship with somebody before they're ready for it. That becomes a very difficult thing for a lot of young men and women. And I know in our modern culture, there's a lot of, I have a friend of mine several friends of mine, I could list probably 10 different friends of mine who, it was interesting that they made lifestyle changes when they suffered a very significant relationship disappointment. Okay, I'm not saying that's the whole deal. I'm not trying to make any sort of declarative statement about how all of that works. But I am saying it is interesting that there's a lot of people out there who who open up doors to sin that might not have been open had they not aroused love until it was ready, until it pleased. A man is entrusted by God to keep his daughter innocent. I hope every father takes that role seriously. And I wouldn't just say daughters, I would say sons also. It is your job to teach a boy how to respect a girl, and it is your job to teach a girl how to be respected. It is your job to teach your daughters how to love, and it is your job to teach your sons how to display love, regularly by serving others and sacrificing and doing all the things that Scripture teaches. A man is entrusted by God to keep his future wife innocent. And I would say that, especially for those who date, if this girl that I'm dating is somebody that I could consider a wife one day, I should be working very hard to maintain her purity, her innocence, and her holiness. If it is not somebody that I could see myself marrying one day, then what in the world am I doing anyway? That's just what I the conclusion I've come to. And then also, brothers should watch out for their sisters. So, we've got a lot of brothers that are watching right now. Take care of your sisters, and that should be one of your highest priorities is to take care of your sisters. One of the reasons for all of this, when you're digging into marriages and such, is that innocence in a relationship creates intimacy and desire. Whenever a relationship is built on purity, it's built on innocence, it's built on holiness, there is statistically a higher level of satisfaction and physical intimacy that happens in that marriage. So if you can teach young men not only their spiritual duty of pursuing purity, but also the practical benefit is that it will create a better situation for you later on in life in that marriage. Maybe we can convince some of these young men that God's way is better than the world's way. And that hopefully should be our goal. So, any questions on Song of Solomon as a whole, or any of the text tonight, or really the whole book, before I move on into some spiritual applications or additions? They don't have to be questions. I'd love for you to teach something. Okay. And then we move on. Spiritual application it is. So, one of my favorite illustrations to talk about whenever I'm talking to somebody in an evangelistic capacity, especially somebody that's coming from a religious background, and I'm trying to teach them, for instance, about the role of baptism in God, what God has delivered in his gospel. And I'll get people who are very convinced, but I know Jesus. He is my Lord. He's been my Lord for 15 years. I accepted him as my Lord when I was 6 years old. And you get these stories of the relationship that these people feel they have with the Lord. This is one of my favorite illustrations to go to. Following Jesus is like building a marriage. And there is a point at which, when we first come to know Jesus, we become infatuated with him because we realize what a great partner he would be. He is protective, he is providing, he is loving, he is complimentary to us, he works out difficult situations for us. We could all night long go around and talk about the benefits of being connected to Jesus, right? Everybody with me on that? So we know following Jesus is a wonderful thing to experience and participate in. But that does not necessarily mean that we are in a committed relationship with Jesus. You can fall in love with somebody without actually belonging to them. And I think that's very similar to what a lot of people experience in the religious world about following Jesus, is that they know they have a relationship with Jesus, but they've never been taught how to pursue that relationship by his standards. Okay? We love him. We follow him. We think he's wonderful. We want everything to do with him. But if we still haven't done the things that he has told us to do, we're still not married to him. And so part of what we have in that plan of salvation is the engagement and the marriage ceremony. So I picture the repentance being like, I'm going to use some old-timey terms here, going steady. Okay, I don't know what the modern terms are for all of this anymore. I can't keep up. I can't even keep up with which social media I'm supposed to be on if I'm cool. But it's one of those things of that idea of repenting and turning away from your life without Jesus to pursuing a life with Jesus, that's the idea of going steady. And confessing him as Lord is the idea of becoming engaged. It's the idea of, you know what, now I am going to say, I will do everything he tells me to do. I belong to him, that I will give up my, everything of my own and follow him. That's kind of the engagement. Girls tell other guys, I can't date you. I belong to this guy. I have a ring on my finger that says I belong to this guy. Right? Everybody with me so far? Okay. And then baptism is the wedding ceremony. There's actually a really good book by LaGard Smith called Baptism, the Believer's Wedding Ceremony. Just an excellent book on baptism. But it's that idea of, as we pursue this relationship with God, we don't actually take Jesus's name as our name. We don't belong to Jesus in a covenantal relationship until we have been married to him. And baptism is that point at which you become married to him. And then after you're married to him, you're going to second guess the relationship. You're going to worry that you said the wrong thing, did the wrong thing. There are times when you will do the wrong thing. And does he still love me? You're still growing in that relationship with him and depth toward him. And he continually assures us that he loves us and protects us and watches over us. Now, it doesn't mean we can't adulterate. It doesn't mean we can't walk away from him and do our own thing. That's what James chapter 4, verse 4 really means when it calls the readers there, you adulteresses. Now notice it doesn't say you adulterers and adulteresses. Some of your versions might try to make it gender generic. But the truth is that adulteresses because we are the bride belonging to Jesus. So we are adulteresses when we know, do you not know that friendship with the world is hostility toward God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. When we try to court and love on and have a relationship with the world, when we're supposed to belong to Jesus, because now we're in a covenant relationship with him, we are adulterating. And when we do that, we risk that relationship. But that whole idea of being in a relationship with Jesus that is a growing and developing relationship that has a beginning point and a commitment point and an engagement point and a baptism or ceremony or covenantal point, and then you continue to grow and strengthen that relationship, and you continue to learn to trust him and that his way is best. That is this picture. And while I don't necessarily believe that's the point of the book of Song of Solomon, I think the point of Song of Solomon is just to describe a godly relationship. We do have later on, Ephesians chapter 5, our relationship with Jesus compared to the relationship of a husband and wife, right? Everybody remember that passage? So in Ephesians chapter 5, if our relationship with Jesus is supposed to look like a godly husband and wife relationship, we would expect there to be plenty of parallels in this book which describes a godly husband and wife relationship. Does that make sense? So, again, that whole concept of being able to develop that relationship with Jesus, the way we would develop a relationship between husband and wife, I think is, again, a good illustration to use with people whenever they're struggling with, well, how is it that you're saying I'm not saved if I have a relationship with Jesus? Well, my relationship with my wife started a year and half a month before we got married. Just because we weren't married doesn't mean we didn't have a relationship. But it does mean until we were married, I was not truly in a covenant with her until that marriage ceremony took place. Everybody with me on that? And just like with Jesus, you can be in a relationship with Jesus. You can be a disciple, a follower of Jesus who has not yet obeyed or committed yourself to a covenantal relationship with Jesus. And that's his goal for us. And honestly, there are some people who will balk at that and go, absolutely not. I am saved, 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 and they won't give up on that idea. Okay. I disagree. The Bible disagrees, but if you want to continue discussing it, we can. But with other people, that illustration has helped a lot of people that I've talked with to understand I'm not invalidating their relationship that they have with Jesus. I am trying to help them complete it. I'm trying to help them bring it all the way to the point that Jesus has offered to them, and letting them know that they're missing out on some of the great blessings that come with being in a relationship with Jesus. And just like with my wife, as much as we loved each other before we got married, there were still certain benefits that were not on the table for us until that relationship happened. Like her really good cooking. She didn't cook for me before we got married. She cooks for me all the time now because we live too far away from restaurants. So it's she and I greatly enjoy that benefit. Having children with her, the intimacy we can share, the friendship that we have that has just grown deeper and deeper over the years. All of that is stuff I did not have in the early days, but I still had something then, and that something was valuable. It just was not complete yet. And so Song of Solomon helps show that picture of a developing and growing relationship that has a point at which you are in a covenant relationship. It works great on a spiritual level. Any questions, thoughts, or additions? Comments, complaints, any celebratory shouts of hurrah that Song of Solomon is over? Maybe that's where we're at this point. Who knows? Well, I do appreciate your participation. Just so that you know what's coming up, we are starting. Alan sent out an email early this morning, but we are starting Bible classes at the building again on Sunday, but Sundays only. So be there at 9:30. We will spend the month of September catching up, kind of reviewing from Genesis all the way through Ruth. To kind of catch us up on our quarter schedule. And then starting hopefully in October, everything will be back to normal and we'll be doing Bible classes in October. If that's not the case, we will just continue in the auditorium or in some capacity back on the schedule. Because we're not together on Wednesday night, and because not everybody gets on the Zoom on Wednesday night, we are going to do a different study on Wednesday than we do on Sunday. So when we hand out the schedule of the reading, and this is probably important for Steve to know since he puts out that schedule, we are going to do the same rate of reading. I'm just going to have to cover 2 lessons every Sunday. So just so you know, when we get back on the reading, we're going to be on the regular reading schedule. I will just, instead of handling 3 chapters, I'll handle 6 chapters on a Sunday. And good luck to me, right? That's the theme of that. And then on Wednesday, starting next week, we are going to start a class on authority. I'd sent out on Facebook any thoughts or comments or ideas for teachings coming up, and several of you mentioned a good class on authority. How do we establish authority of Scripture and interpret the Scriptures? And so we're going to do that on Wednesday night. I've got right now scheduled between 10 and 12 classes. If we end up back in October, we might just do that on a different night of the week or something. We'll figure out some way of fitting that in and finishing that class. but hopefully we have to play it all by ear these days. So we do that. So we'll start a class on authority. It will be kid friendly also. So I know Gibson really wants to join the class, and I know the Joneses were having some of their kids sit in on it. So hopefully it will be helpful to them too. Won't really be taught on that level, but we'll kind of see how it goes. All right. Any questions, thoughts? If you have specific questions on authority, maybe some sort of confusing biblical issue that you've always wanted answered that I might could use as an illustration in the class, you're welcome to email that to me or text it to me, and I'll put it in my notes. And that way we can kind of make sure that questions are being answered, and we're going from there. So, all right. It seems like everybody is settled into silence this evening. So you're welcome to unmute yourself if you want to. I'll leave it up for just a couple of minutes, and we can talk.
Does anybody have any questions about the Bible storytelling event? If your family is participating